Okay, so we now proceed with the techniques of environmental crime detection. So ano ba ang crime detection? I know may idea na kayo dito, for clear na kayo di ba? So crime detection begins with the discovery of a crime scene and proceeds through the process of evidence, collection, identification, and analysis. Another means of detecting crime is when a crime has been reported to you directly. So either nakita mo muna yung crime scene or may nagsabi sa'yo, sir, may crime scene doon o may krimen na nangyari doon. So the process of uncovering criminal activity or verifying reported crime and acquiring evidence is in order to identify and prosecute its perpetrator. So you have to, of course, detect the crime in order for you to gather the evidence, the pieces of evidence you need for prosecution. Siyempre, anong sasabihin mo sa prosecutor? Sir, basta may krimen doon. Pwede ba yun? Siyempre, hindi. So crime detection falls into three distinguishable phases: the discovery that a crime has been committed, the identification of a suspect, and the collection of sufficient evidence to indict the suspect before a court. Remember, you cannot file a case without sufficient evidence, especially kapag sinabi ng prosecutor, hindi pa sapat yung ebidensya na nakuha mo. Crime scene, kumuha ka ulit ng ebidensya o kaya tuloy mo muna yung investigation mo kasi kulang pa ito. Hindi ito sapat para masabi natin kung talagang may krimen na nangyari o kumbaga para maipanalo yung kaso, hindi man maipanalo, maisampan na lang yung kaso. So to detect such crimes, therefore, controversial methods are sometimes required: electronic eavesdropping, surveillance, interception of communications, and infiltration of gangs. So ano na lang to review lang, kaya mabilis lang tayo. Okay, eavesdropping is the act of secretly listening to the private conversation of others without their consent. So, pakikichismis, sabihin na natin. Nakikinig ka sa usapan ng iba, and you call that eavesdropping. And when you use electronic devices for you to hear other people's conversation, then yun, wiretapping naman na yun. Basta si eavesdropping, nakikinig ka lang sa usapan ng iba nang hindi nila alam at hindi sila pumayag. Okay, crime intelligence, information compiled, analyzed, and or disseminated in an effort to anticipate, prevent, or monitor criminal activity. Investigation is an inquiry, judicial or otherwise, for the discovery and collection of facts concerning the matters involved. Uh, ito na, pag-iimbestiga, gathering of evidence. Ito is the process of inquiring, pagtatanong, pagkakandak ng interview, interrogation, eliciting, soliciting, and getting vital information, not only with people, but with the pieces of evidence you have gathered from the crime scene. Facts, circumstances, in order to establish the truth. So wildlife crime detection by law enforcement agencies. How is this committed? How is this done? The capacity of law enforcement agencies to detect wildlife crime is perceived to be adequate, with some activities being strategically targeted towards places most affected by wildlife crime. So DENR, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, is mapping wildlife crime hotspots and taking targeted intervention. Pag sinabing crime hotspots, ito ay mga lugar kung saan talamak ang wildlife crime. Okay. Customs is further strategically targeting ports and airports. Kasi kung galing sa ibang bansa, if the crime committed is transnational in nature, of course, dahil transnational nga siya, may ibang bansa na involved. The only way for them to enter the country is through our ports, seaports, airports. And there seem to be some proactive elements on joint operations. However, an area for improvement relates to the amount of border control staff and border control equipment. Kasi hindi sapat na tao lang ang mahusay. Kailangan meron din siyang mga kagamitan. Either aso para makaamoy siya, 'di ba? Um, at iba pang devices doon sa mga ports ito nilalagay para mapigil yung entry ng mga illegal materials, illegal sabihin na natin wildlife na maipasok through the ports. Where it was highlighted that the country requires more staff capacity building to detect illegal wildlife at ports and airports and more power to intercept illegal shipments coming into the country. Kasi baka pinakargo pala nila, ah, mahirap nga naman na i-check pa yun isa-isa. So the authorities should be well equipped, not the people, and then they have equipment that could support their operation. Lastly, while there are systems and procedures in place for the management and reintegration of seized live animals, challenges remain with receiving centers often being under-equipped and overpopulated. So either kulang sila sa gamit, yung mga uh, centers na meron na tayo para ma-accommodate yung mga wildlife na nakukuha nila mula doon sa mga ports. At yun, either kulang o hindi equipped ang mga centers na yon or sobrang dami na, overpopulated na. Hindi mo na sila mai-house, kaya nahihirapan. Okay, intelligence-led approach in the investigation of wildlife crime. Overall responses to the indicators evaluating the national capacity to use intelligence in the investigation of wildlife crimes suggests that investigations are rarely driven by intelligence but rather conducted in a more reactive manner. As an example is the collection of information after an incident. National procedures and systems for consolidating information collected on wildlife crime have been established, although the DENR is currently developing and piloting the Environmental Law Enforcement Management Information System or LMIS. Um, sinisimulan nila yan in order to address this gap, yung kulang ka ng information mula doon sa mga wildlife crime na nangyayari. So the system is not yet operational. Sometimes, criminal intelligence analysis is being developed, but it remains a challenge due to the lack of access to a database and most likely also due to a lack of trained intelligence analysts. So, of course, you have, di ba, meron tayong three eyes of investigation. Interview interrogation is one. Uh, Another is instrumentation. Kaya mahalaga na may sapat, sorry, ano to? Instrumentation and information. Yon, yung information, mahalaga nga para may sapat na kaalaman ka na kung papaano mo isasagawa yung mga anti-crime operations mo. Especially, sa pinag-uusapan natin ay yung environmental crimes. Kaya kailangan ng extensive and comprehensive na database. And of course, hindi lang sapat na meron kang information. Kailangan yung tao na nag-iimbestiga, yung intelligence officers ninyo, ay mahusay din. So, use of specialized investigation techniques to combat wildlife crime. The main measures traditionally employed by law enforcement agencies in relation to the investigation of offenses include search and seizure of property, arrest and questioning, and covert operations such as surveillance, controlled delivery, and undercover activities. So, usual lang kung ano yung mga naituro sa inyo sa investigation na paraan ng pag-conduct ng overt and covert operations. Ganun lang din sa environmental crimes. In some instances, special investigative measures have been created for the investigation of wildlife trafficking. Depending on where wildlife and forest offenses are legislated in domestic law, and depending on the authorities in charge, investigation measures and detection methods may be found in different types of statutes. This may include, for instance, general statutes concerning criminal procedure or police powers, customs laws, or specific statutes relating to wildlife, forest, or other environmental matters according to the UNODC. Intelligence gathering. Law enforcement is increasingly led by intelligence kasi wala namang mga kriminal na sasabihin nila muna kung ano yung plano nila. Of course, all well, almost all crimes are done covertly at pinagpaplanuhan na yan. So you have to have the intelligence, the processed information, yun nga, yung intelligence, in order for you to plan and go about paano mo sasagawa yung operation mo. This involves inter alia, the collation, analysis, and dissemination of information, and provides a systematic approach to critical thinking, which in turn can assist in the prevention and suppression of criminal activities. In the field of wildlife trafficking, however, intelligence is often missing or non-existent, which restricts the abilities of agencies to coordinate and implement well-informed responses to individual cases or general initiatives. Kaya, well, obvious nga rin sa curriculum natin yun, di ba? Ngayon pa lang tayo, or recently lang nagkaroon ng, eto, Introduction to Environmental Laws. Kung ngayon pa lang tayo nagsisimula, well, ibig sabihin nun, hindi pa rin ganun ka-developed ang intelligence with regards to environmental crime. Kaya sabi kanina, it's lacking. So there are two means of information gathering. It's either you do it overtly or covertly. Alam niyo na to, di ba? Pag overt, you do it openly. And covert, naka-cover nga siya. So closed. You are doing it secretly. Okay, intelligence cycle is the process of developing unrefined data into polished intelligence for the use of policy makers. Nakakuha ka ng information, inanalyze mo siya, at kapag napatunayan mo na lahat na legit yon at alam mong magagamit ninyo sa operation ninyo, then it becomes intelligence. First is direction. Intelligence requirements are determined by a decision maker to meet his or her objective. Collection is the gathering. Collection nga eh. Di pagkuha yan. Gathering of raw information based on requirements. Then we have processing. Converting the vast amount of information collected into a form usable by analysts. Then we have analysis, conversion of raw information into intelligence. It includes integrating, evaluating, analyzing data, and preparing intelligence product. Ayun na nga. So, malapit ka na sa pag-convert ng information into intelligence after analysis. And then, kapag okay na siya, yung naging intelligence na yung information mo, the next step would be dissemination. Inform mo yung iba, hindi pwedeng ikaw lang nakakaalam. So it is the distribution of raw or finished intelligence to the consumer who needs initiated the intelligence requirement. And then feedback is received from the decision maker and revised requirement issued. So feedback, yun na nga, bumalik na sa'yo. So naibigay mo yung intelligence, ginamit yon ng policy makers sa kanilang mga decision making, sa kanilang planning. And then, kung ano yung mapagdesisyonan nila, kung ano yung maiplano nila, yun na yung feedback. Yun na yung malalaman mo. Ganito pala yung gagawin namin. Strategic intelligence. So it is intelligence that enables accurate assessments of the levels and patterns of wildlife trafficking at local, national, and international levels. Strategic intelligence facilitates law reform, international cooperation, and the development of prevention strategies, education and awareness campaigns. You use the intelligence strategically. Ginagamit mo na siya sa tamang, ah, kumbaga kung ano talaga yung gampanin niya, kung para saan talaga siya. Tactical intelligence is intelligence about the activities of specific individuals or groups. It can help identify criminals, give advance information about their activities, and help plan proactive, disruptive, and further intelligence-led investigations. In the context of wildlife trafficking, it can involve issues such as methods of sourcing wildlife, timber, and plants, transportation, methods of document fraud, methods of communication, financial transactions, motives ng mga criminals na ito, saan binibenta, markets, prices, and others. So, tactical intelligence pertains to the specific activities of specific individuals. Ano-ano yung mga bagay na ginagawa ng mga grupo na yon o ng mga taong yon. Okay? Activities yon ha. Financial investigations, of course. Well, usually environmental crimes are done by groups. Bibihira naman yung individual lang. Siguro, kung large scale ang operation, ang criminal operation, most likely it is done by an organized group. But if it is done in a small scale, yan, nagputol ka lang ng puno na walang paalam sa DENR, yun yung mga individual environmental crimes. Okay. And when you know this, organized criminals uh, do these crimes with the intention to gain a lot of money. So, ang gagawin mo, ang isa mong pwedeng gawin na paraan ng pag-iimbestiga, trace mo yung pera. Saan napunta? Eh dahil illegal yan, syempre kailangan nilang labhan yan, di ba? So, kailangan nilang i-launder yung pera. So financial investigation plays a crucial role in the successful investigation of wildlife trafficking. The financial aspects of the crime present themselves in at least two distinct ways. Wildlife trafficking is frequently about money, syempre. In addition to the initial investment to create the infrastructure, the ongoing management of the proceeds of the crime and the laundering and movement of the profits are essential parts of wildlife trafficking. Kailangan talagang malinis muna yung pera. Kasi nga galing sa illegal eh. Another is wildlife trafficking, especially if conducted continuously, can become a lifestyle crime. Lifestyle pursuits such as travel, expenditure on luxury items like cars and jewelry, and leisure activities, frequenting restaurants and casinos, all require means and methods of purchase. Isang paraan para luminis ang pera, di ba? You buy luxury items. Bili ka ng kotse gawa sa ginto. Bili ka ng mga paintings na almost priceless na. Kaya yung pera na-convert siya sa material and then when you actually need the money, ibebenta mo na lang siya nun ulit. Ganun. So for this reason, the investigation of financial transactions and the analysis of the results often provide important information and can provide evidence that may be used in prosecutions. As it is the case with financial investigation, goods related to wildlife trafficking can lead to further investigation. For instance, if weapons used for poaching are confiscated, it is possible to use information gleaned from the seizure to start the investigation for wildlife trafficking. Illegal logging can be detected by following chainsaws and trucks, which are used for illegal deforestation. Siyempre, di mo naman pwedeng kabud na lang buhatin yung puno, di ba? Malalaki yung mga puno na yon. Hindi rin sila basta-basta mapuputol. So, kailangan mo ng equipment. So, ititrace mo yung mga equipment na yon. Pag may umaakyat ng mga truck sa bundok, eh wala naman talaga siyang dapat gawin doon. Magtataka ka na. Ang daming bumili ng chainsaw. By the way, there's a separate law for chainsaw law. Okay. Forfeiture, seizure, confiscation. Seizure is a provisional measure which results either in confiscation, in forfeiture, or in the return of the goods to their owner, depending on the decision on the merits of a case. To seize an animal part, or plant suspected of having been trafficked, it generally suffices to demonstrate a reasonable belief that the seized item is a contraband. A particular challenge in the context of wildlife trafficking is the seizure of live specimens, which need to be properly kept and cared for. Nag-traffic ka ng mga tiger, nag-traffic ka ng mga lion, ng rhinoceros, medyo papaano mo itatago, I mean, paano mo siya pangangalagaan, di ba, kapag na-seize mo na siya. So, it remains a challenge. Many border control points, customs agencies, and other authorities have neither the facilities nor the expertise to look after such specimens. For this reason, they often have to rely on private entities such as zoos to take care of the seized animals. Alang ilagay mo yun sa opisina ng DENR, di ba? May na-seize kayong ahas. So similar challenges arise if seized animals need to be returned to their place of origin because, 'di ba? Ang mga animals, they have their natural habitat at kapag inalis mo sila doon, of course, hindi mahihirapan sila mag-adapt doon sa panibagong habitat. Kung sanay siya nasa disyerto siya nakatira, ilipat mo siya sa rainforest, baka mabaliw siya doon. So, the only remedy is to take him back to his natural habitat. Then we have patrols and checkpoints. Physical patrols and checkpoints not only play an important role for the prevention of illegal activities in the wildlife and forestry sectors. They are also essential for the detection of wildlife trafficking. Such measures mean that officials and local actors may be at or closer to the scene when a crime is attempted or committed. It increases the likelihood that crimes are detected and potentially stopped. That crime scenes are secured and perpetrators are apprehended. Kaya, mahalaga na merong physical patrols kasi may umiikot. Either, alam niyo naman, yung iba't ibang uri ng patrol, di ba? And nagkakaroon ng mga checkpoint para alam kung ano yung mga dumadaan, ano yung laman ng mga sasakyan na dumadaan sa isang daanan. Kasi baka contraband na nga yun, baka ito, na traffic na pala sila. Forests and wildlife habitats are often remote, large, and inaccessible areas that are difficult, if not impossible, to patrol regularly. Alam mo, magpatrol ka sa gubat, di ba? Medyo mahirap yon. And comprehensively. Forestry officials, game wards, park rangers, police, and other law enforcement officials can usually only patrol small areas and as a result, rarely see wildlife trafficking in progress or are the first to observe evidence of criminal activity in these areas. Risk management and systematic patrols with routes set out to optimize coverage of relevant areas are basic methods to improve intelligence gathering and detection. So yeah, that's another importance of conducting patrols. In addition, checkpoints along main roads, rivers, trade routes, and interchanges at ports, airports, and key entry points to national parks and other protected areas can also assist in detecting and preventing wildlife trafficking. So, pwede naman na hindi natin iasa lahat well, mainly on police officers. But we can tap other agencies, especially sa mga ganitong lugar. Officials on patrol or stationed at relevant checkpoints need to be equipped with powers to stop suspects and should be able to demand that persons suspected of illegal activity produce required licenses and permits. Control or customs natin. Border control and other measures employed by customs authorities are vital in the detection and enforcement of wildlife trafficking. Border crossings and ports often constitute important points for interventions by customs and other law enforcement officers. The role of customs is highly dependent on whether officers have investigative powers or not. Because if a certain officer cannot conduct investigation, wala siyang authority, then syempre hindi siya makakapag-imbestiga. Either customs officers themselves can investigate instances of wildlife trafficking detected at the border independently, or they have to refer suspicious cases to other authorities. Kasi nga, hindi ka naman basta-basta papayagan magsagawa ng investigasyon mo. Kailangan meron kang authority, kailangan meron kang karapatan na magsagawa ng investigation mo. So either sila na ang gagawa, yung customs officers natin, or i-refer nila sa ibang agency, sa ibang persons of authority, yung mga suspicion nila or suspicious cases nila. Use of force. In some cases, enforcement agencies rely on coercive powers to demand compliance with irrelevant wildlife and forestry laws. For meaningful enforcement of the law, criminal justice actors investigating wildlife and forest offenses and other agencies need to be equipped with the powers that enable them to conduct searches, interview witnesses and suspects, enter premises, seize assets, and make arrests. As a last resort, force may be used to carry out procedural measures if this is reasonable and appropriate in the circumstances. So, kaparehas lang sa naituro na sa inyo dati sa mga crimes na usually na-encounter ng police officers. They follow, what do you call this? The rules of engagement. And kapag yung hinuhuli nilang kriminal, they provided the reason para yung police ay gumamit ng force, then you can use force already. Basta, masunod mo lang din yung tamang procedure. Covert investigation techniques. Covert investigation methods involve, for instance, the controlled delivery of wildlife contraband. Siyempre, from their natural habitat, ililipat mo sila. So talagang magdi-deliver ka. The use of undercover operations or the use of surveillance. The use of such techniques can be crucial if they are possible and permissible under domestic law and if their use is appropriate in a given case. The United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime lists a series of special investigative techniques such as controlled delivery, undercover operations, and electronic and other surveillance and encourages state parties to make appropriate use of them. Kailangan lang yung state, yung bansa na magpapatupad nito ay panukala ng batas para sa tamang paraan ng delivery, ng undercover operations, and surveillance. In this context, states must balance the competing interests of ensuring public safety through arrests and detention of criminals with the need to ensure the rights of individuals. Covert investigation methods can be particularly intrusive and thus require a solid legal basis and proper authorization. Remember, di ba meron tayong Philippine Constitution. Doon sa Constitution, andun lahat ng karapatan natin. At hindi mo yun basta-basta pwedeng alisin sa isang tao. Kung aalisin mo man yun, kailangan may paalam ka pa rin. kailangan meron kang probable cause, kailangan meron kang ah, reasonable cause para alisin sa isang tao ang kanyang constitutional right. For example, search and seizure, 'di ba? Meron tayong karapatan na magmay-ari ng isang property. So hindi pwedeng basta-basta na lang kunin sa atin yung property. Kunin man 'yan ng authorities, kailangan meron kang search warrant, 'di ba? Kailangan, sabi nga dito, meron kang solid legal basis and proper authorization in order for you to conduct covert investigation techniques. Internet surveillance. It is a further and increasingly important tool to detect instances of wildlife trafficking. Most things nowadays are done online, pati pagbebenta, di ba? Usong-uso naman ang online shopping. At pati mga illegal na bagay, nag-online shopping na rin sa black market. Examinations of online advertisements of flora and fauna have shown that websites are frequently used to sell or seek wildlife contraband. In 2012, an automated digital surveillance system was developed to monitor reports on illegally traded wildlife and wildlife products online. The dark web, or yung black market nga, is, the dark web is the black market online. It is another online space where contraband is traded. Though surveillance of communication relating to wildlife trafficking in the dark web is only in its infancy. Baby pa siya. Controlled deliveries. They are used when enforcers decide to allow a shipment known or suspected to contain illegal origin wildlife to continue to be transported from one country to another but strictly under controlled conditions. So pag sinabing controlled, literal na nakokontrol mo saan sila dadaan, ano lang yung mga pwede nilang dalhin, ano lang yung mga pwede nilang i-deliver. Kaya siya controlled. This investigation measure can be set in motion when law enforcement officials physically detect or otherwise become aware of animal parts or plants of apparently illegal origin. Controlled deliveries are used to identify the participants throughout the distribution network. As with other covert investigation measures, it is essential that domestic law provides a sufficient legal basis to conduct controlled deliveries. If such a measure is not expressly permitted or prohibited, prosecution authorities have to decide if controlled deliveries are an investigation tool that produces evidence that will be admissible in criminal proceedings and have to check which conditions must be met. In cases involving controlled deliveries across borders, international cooperation must be sought in advance, also to ensure that the specimens do not enter the illicit trade. Crime scene investigation. Crime scene works. Crime scene work plays a central role in the investigation of wildlife trafficking. Since such work can involve traces of perpetrators and objects of the crime as well as evidence that may be presented in court, crime scene investigations must be particularly meticulous, detailed records must be kept. It is also important that a proper chain of custody is maintained for each item of evidence. So, alam niyo na to, yung usual sa crime scene investigation. Kailangan gawin mo siya ng maayos kasi kapag hindi mo nakolekta ng maayos ang ebidensya, maaaring hindi mo na to magamit sa korte kapag kinontest, 'di ba? In the context of wildlife trafficking, crime scene investigations can be difficult because offenses often take place in remote areas. Yung crime scene mo bundok, yung crime scene mo disyerto, yung crime scene mo dagat, mahirap. It can often take place in remote areas where no enforcement agencies are based and where laboratories and scientific expertise are not readily available. Hindi katulad dito, for example, nangyari ang isang krimen sa Angeles. Andyan lang yung crime lab. Pag na-kolekta na ang pieces of evidence, pwede na siyang dalhin agad sa crime lab. Hindi tulad sa mga yan, nasa bundok ka, syempre wala namang opisina ang crime lab sa bundok, di ba? So, Medyo travel ka pa. Kaya medyo mahirap. Crime scene work involves proper preparation and rapid preservation of relevant locations. It requires proper equipment and trained personnel familiar with crime scene management and record keeping. Forensic science. So, depending on the nature of the alleged offense, various types of forensic methods are used. Identification and morphological studies are used to determine the species of a particular animal by analyzing bones, hairs, feathers, scales, and other organs and tissues. So, yung body parts ng animal, animal, sasabihin ko sana. This can also help establish the possible illegal origin of an animal part or plant. Hirap maging ano, no, magsalita ng nasanay ka na sa Kapampangan. Microscopy or elemental analysis are used, for example, to identify ivory. Pathological studies involving the examination of carcasses, organs, tissues, and other samples from dead animals can be used to determine the cause of an animal's death. So, meron din silang autopsy para sa animals. Minsan kasi sa ano 'to, sa trafficking, body parts lang ng animals. Kung maalala niyo yung lesson natin dati, 'pag shark, yung fin lang ng shark ta's binabalik yung shark sa ocean ta's slow death yun para sa kanila. O kaya yun nga, yung ivory, yun yung mga ano 'to, sa elephant, kalimutan ko yung tawag, pero yun. Yun lang yung mga pino-poach yung mga elephants for their body parts. And then, yeah, ano sila. So, yun, kapag nakakuha ng uh, body parts ng animals, of course, you have to test it in order for you to positively identify kung ano ba yun. DNA testing, discussed further in the next section, is widely used to track wildlife poaching and illegal logging, especially through the use of DNA testing at points of origin, transit, and final sale. Other technologies used to investigate wildlife trafficking include inter alia satellite technology and which helps to monitor illegal logging and other forms of illegal land clearance. Yun nga, yung nagkukos ng deforestation, kiniklear nila yung lupa, kiniklear nila yung gubat, including felling protected trees. Tama yan ha, felling. Pinutol. Okay.